Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, in the studio audience here at the LIU, Lebanese International University in the ancient city of Saida, and of course to the worldwide audience of Al Mayadeen TV. Assalamu alaikum. We are here this evening for Kalima Horra, free word. We believe that every word has the right to be free. That's my words and your words. My words are mine alone. They are not the responsibility of Al Mayadeen TV, neither are yours the responsibility of any political party or organization. We believe, as I say, that every word has the right to be free. So feel free this evening. Once I've had my say, then it will be your turn. We're here to talk about Jerusalem, Al-Quds al-Sharif, Holy Jerusalem, which is 1 hour's drive from here, at least at the speed I drive at. 1 hour's drive away is Holy Jerusalem, where Jesus walked, where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, ascended from the roof of Al-Aqsa to the heavens and returned with the revelation. So it's not a small thing. It's not just any city. It is the Terra Santa, the Holy Land. And it's 1 hour from here, and it is in the hands of foreigners by force. All of it, west and east, taken by force of arms, illegitimately. It was illegally annexed as a whole city by what they call the State of Israel. And on the age-old principle of fait accompli, accomplished facts, Israel has sought to persuade the world that because this illegally, militarily, violently occupied Holy Land, which belongs to all of us, all of the people of the book, belongs only to them. By illegally annexing it, they sought to persuade the world that it belonged only to them, and guess what? It appears that they have largely succeeded. And I'm speaking about it tonight, hey, because hardly anybody else is. I don't hear any Arab leaders talking about Jerusalem and its need to be liberated. They are ready to spend blood and treasure to liberate Aleppo, but they are not ready to spend a cent or a drop of their blood to liberate Jerusalem. Indeed, some of them have signed a surrender with the illegal occupier, have normalized their relations with the illegal occupier, have embassies with the illegal occupier, and allow the illegal occupier to have embassies in their capital and meet them on a more or less daily basis. I don't know if in Laylat al-Qadr they spared a thought in their prayers for Jerusalem. If they did, then for me they are hypocrites, because to ask God for something that you are not ready to lift a finger to achieve yourself, that's just hypocrisy. So if nobody else is going to speak about Jerusalem, we are going to speak about it on Al Mayadeen TV, on Kalima Horra, here at the LIU in Sidon, 1 hour's drive away. The trigger for the discussion, of course, is the visit by that plank of wood, that big palooka, as the Americans say, a man so wooden the birds are nesting on his shoulders and on his head, Mitt Romney, who, guess what, might just be the next president of the United States of America. So what he says is not a small thing either. What he does is not a small thing either. And what did he do? Well, apart from coming to London, the capital of the United States' closest ally, which has followed them like a dog through every war over these last years, and insulting the British and their handling of the Olympic Games so badly that the British Prime Minister had to contradict him with him standing beside him in 10 Downing Street, apart from insulting a whole series of European civilizations, Romney much more seriously went on to insult the Palestinian people, to insult the Arabs, to insult the Muslims, and to insult the Arabs and the Ummah as a whole. What did he say? Well, first of all, and this will come as a surprise to the Palestinians in this audience, here and watching across the world, he said that Israeli culture was superior to Palestinian Arab culture. This must have come as such a surprise even to many Israelis whose culture is McDonald's hamburgers and the culture of Brooklyn, USA, which, with all due respect, is not the highest culture in the world. The ancient Arab civilization was dismissed just like that by the man who might just be the next president of the United States. Even more seriously than that insult, he declared not just the traditional undying support for Israel from his presidency, if la samahallah, God forbid, it comes to pass, but he said that he would recognize Holy Jerusalem, this illegally occupied city, this city which belongs to all of us, as the capital of what Netanyahu describes as the Jewish state. We don't accept this nomenclature, of course, because many Jews in Jerusalem and around the world do not accept this political state of Zionism. We don't accept this nomenclature because many Jews, secular Jews around the world, do not accept this act of theft. But he calls it the Jewish state, and Romney is going to recognize it as the capital of the Jewish state and move the American embassy to Jerusalem. So let's talk for a moment, although international law seems to mean very little nowadays, about the legal position of Jerusalem. Jerusalem does not belong to Israel. This is a matter of legal fact. The western part of it was occupied by arms in defiance of the 1948 United Nations partition plan, and the eastern part of it was occupied by arms in the so-called Six-Day War in 1967. Its subsequent annexation is null and void legally. It has no legal force in international law, and no country in the world, even the United States, has been prepared to recognize this annexation and move their embassy to occupied Jerusalem. But when Romney made this statement, I don't know how it was broadcast in America, but even on the BBC, I shouldn't say even, the BBC has become the Bush and Blair Corporation, but even on the BBC, they said that Romney's remarks had caused trouble because Jerusalem is disputed territory. It is not disputed territory. It is illegally occupied territory. This is a matter of legal fact. And a thief does not become the lawful owner of his property that he stole because he kept it for a long time. A thief is a thief is a thief. Stolen property is stolen property is stolen property for however long the thief may possess it. Of course, they have the weapons, but they have something more important than the weapons. And it's this, that this ummah that they teach us about in the schools, in the mosques, even in the churches, has done nothing to recover Jerusalem and has forgotten Jerusalem. Well, the Palestinian people have never forgotten Jerusalem. It is their city. It is their capital city. and we reject Romney's nonsense, and if the United States goes ahead with this recognition of this act of theft and illegal annexation, the very least we have to demand is that the Arab leaders, the kings and the presidents of the Arab world, tell the United States that they will not only break their relations with what they call the state of Israel, but there can be no normal relations between the Arab world and the United States of America, which has validated this act, this criminal act of occupation and annexation. It's a remarkable thing. I don't remember, maybe you do, maybe I'm out of the loop. I don't remember the last time I heard an Arab leader talking about Jerusalem. I really don't. Well, we are not going to forget it here on Kalima Horra or on Al Mayadeen TV. And I don't think you, as an audience, are ready to forget Jerusalem either. We want to talk about what's happening in Jerusalem, the Judaization of the city, the ethnic cleansing of the city, the fact that the faithful people cannot reach the church and the mosque to pray if they are under 50 years old, the fact that the city, the old city of Jerusalem, is surrounded by foreign soldiers who came from Moscow or from Brooklyn or from London or from Paris in order to stand guard on holy places which belong to all of us. I've had my say. It's your turn right after the break. Welcome back to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, here on Al Mayadeen TV. We're broadcasting from the Lebanese International University, LIU, in the ancient city of Sidon, just 1 hour's drive from the holy city of Jerusalem. And we are talking about the recent visit of Mitt Romney, who might just be the next president of the United States, and the wholesale insult that he issued, not just to the Palestinian people, but to the Arabs as a whole, and the pledge which he made to recognize Israel's illegal annexation of the holy city and to recognize it as Israel's capital, and even move the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I had my say. Now it's the chance for the studio audience here at the LIU. So, yes sir, you're first. Go ahead, please.
خير الزيدان جمعية ناشط الثقافية. أولا أود الترحيب بك أستاذ جورج في مدينة صيدا عاصمة المقاومة. في موضوع ما يخص موضوع القدس وزيارة ميت رومني إليها وتصريحه بأنها عاصمة إسرائيل الأبدية كما قال، وأن الإسرائيليين متفوقون ثقافيا في هذه المنطقة. شغلني موضوع رأيته اليوم أن ميت رومني هو من أتباع الديانة المورمونية، مورموني، وهذه الديانة التي تسعى إلى تجميع إسرائيل وتجميع الأسباط، ويعتبر أن إسرائيل حتى أمريكا يجب أن تكون مقرا لأورشليم الجديدة أو صهيون الجديدة. الذي يتبادر إلى ذهني وخاصة فيما رأينا سابقا مثلا من حملة النسر النبيل، اسم الحملة الصليبية التي أطلقها جورج بوش على حربه على العراق وعلى الإرهاب كما ادعى. ما يشغل بالي، ودائما كنا نقول أن القدس هي عاصمة إسلامية، عاصمة فلسطين، وهي تحوي المقدسات الإسلامية والمسيحية، ودائما كنا ندافع عن هذه المقدسات الإسلامية والمسيحية. أين دور الكنيسة العالمية للدفاع عن المقدسات المسيحية في القدس؟ هذا السؤال الذي يجب أن يجاب عنه.
Well, it's a good question. Where are the Christian leaders? But a better question is, where are the Muslim leaders? That's a better question. Because Christianity is the religion of the power. in the Crusader countries. It's the religion of it's the one that Tony Blair and George W. Bush wear on their sleeve. Although I always say, don't confuse them with real Christians. Christians believe in the prophets, peace be upon them. Bush and Blair and their successors believe in the prophets and how to get a bigger piece of them. They are hypocrites. But I don't expect from the Protestant churches in particular any concern about the Israeli illegal occupation of Jerusalem, because these Protestant schematic Christian sects, and the Mormons are a very obscure, very strange sect, they believe that Israel has the right to this land. The Catholic Church is something else, and we deserve more from the Catholic Church. The late Pope, John Paul, he often spoke of the situation of the Palestinian people, and he often spoke about Jerusalem. He didn't do enough, but he often spoke about it. And our brother, Archbishop Capucci, who offered his life on the Mavi Marmara, and many other times actually, and spent years in the prison of the illegal occupier. He is the neighbor living next door to His Holiness the Pope. And he's working hard to try to encourage the Roman Catholic Church to do more. But they don't do more in the United States because, and this is a fact the Arabs have to grasp, most of the Zionists in the United States are not Jews. Many of the Jews in the United States are not Zionists. But most of the Zionists are not Jews. They are fundamentalist Protestant evangelical Christians. And they are, when people think that Romney went there to make sojuk to Israel in order to win Jewish votes in the United States. He did not. He went there to bow to Israel to win Christian votes, to win the votes of these extremist Christian evangelicals, not least because he is a Mormon, because the hard-line Christian fundamentalists, they don't like Mormons, because these Mormons are a strange church, yeah? Until a few years ago, they didn't allow non-white people to reach the upper levels of their church. They only changed because of popular pressure on this question. More importantly, they believe that there was another Christian prophet after Jesus. This is very, very controversial for these evangelical, hardline, fanatic Protestant church people. So he starts off, Romney, with something to do, some work to do, in order to cement the Christian alliance behind him. And of course, President Obama is also a Christian. He's competing in this field. Of course, the right wing in America doesn't believe that President Obama is a Christian. But for sure, he's a Christian. Although it would be good if he lived up to the declaration he made in Cairo. Maybe in his second term, inshallah, he will try to do that. Certainly, he cannot do worse than he has done in his first term. But the better question, isn't it, is what are the Muslims doing about it? Is Jerusalem holy for them or not? Muslims used to pray in the direction of Al-Aqsa. Al-Aqsa is the place to where the Prophet ascended, descended with the revelation. Al-Aqsa is not accessible. You can pray in Al-Aqsa if you were lucky enough to be in your country in Palestine. I can, but the young man sitting behind you cannot, because anybody under 50, any man under 50 will not be allowed almost all the time, to reach the mosque to pray. And many younger Palestinians, Muslims, have never been in Al-Aqsa because they cannot reach it because of foreign soldiers with weapons given by the United States, turning them away in the languages of Russian or Latvian or American English. So all of us have to do more, but the religion and the religious leaders have to do most of all. After all, it surely is wajib on all Muslims to recover Jerusalem. But the leaders are not ready to do anything. They could buy, for example, in the Judaization that's taking place, the ethnic cleansing that's taking place, there are important buildings in East Jerusalem that are being knocked down, that are being purchased by the Zionists in order to complete the ethnic cleansing. Let's take one example. This is me talking, not Al-Mayadeen. Qatar has a lot of money, huh? They can buy anything, huh? Why don't they buy Jerusalem? Why don't they use their money to buy Jerusalem and keep it out of the hands of the foreigners? I'll tell you why. Because the last time I was in Doha, I'm not allowed to go now. The last time I was in Doha, Shimon Peres was sleeping in the same hotel as me. That's why they don't buy Jerusalem. Let's take the second question. Yes, madam.
فاطمة عبد الجواد، الجامعة اللبنانية الدولية صيدا، كلية الإعلام. أصبحت أمريكا الرجاء الوحيد للعرب وللفلسطينيين ربما في حل قضاياهم ومشاكلهم وفي حل القضية الفلسطينية. ولكن بعد وعيهم أهمية أمريكا الكبرى في القرار السياسي العالمي. ولكن إلى أي مدى ممكن أن يكون هذا الرجاء فاسدا في حل مثل هذه القضايا نظرا للحلف الاستراتيجي المتين بين أمريكا وإسرائيل. وهناك سؤال آخر، مع بروز إدارة أمريكية جديدة إلى أي مدى ممكن أن تساهم في حل مثل هذه القضية وإلى كيف ستكون توجهاتها؟ شكرا.
Well, if there is a new American administration, it will take us backwards, not forwards. It will not contribute to resolving the situation. It will be even worse than the Obama administration, which has been pretty bad. Later, Obama will write a book, like President Carter, telling the truth. When it's too late, President Obama knows exactly what needs to be done. He sat at the feet of the late and great Professor Edward Said and Walid Khalidi, Raja Khalidi, and so on. He knows everything about Palestine. I know this because I spoke to President Obama when he was a senator from Chicago. And I know that he knows everything I know and you know about Palestine. But he cannot do anything because he is afraid to do it. He lacks the courage to do it. And we lack the strength to force him to do it. Maybe in his second term, he will be better than in his first. He cannot be worse. But if we get President Mitt Romney, well, we just had a taste of what that new American administration would be. But I have to say this to you. The only reason why the Americans have a strong strategic relation with Israel is because the Arabs are weak. Because they take from the Arabs free anything they want. They can even persuade the Arabs to fight each other and kill each other and give them weapons and money and encouragement and media to do it. That's the reason. If the Arabs said, for example, as the late and great Saudi king said in 1973, in the 73-74 oil embargo, until Palestine is free, there will be no more oil. Even if they said they were going to hold a meeting to discuss this, never mind to do it, the American stock market would collapse. They would be fainting. Their knees would be knocking together. But these Arab rulers will not do that. They will never do that. So as long as the Americans can take from the Arabs anything they want free, why should they pay? If they can give Israel all the support that it needs, whilst keeping the Arabs in their pocket for free, why should they change? The Arabs are not weak. The Arabs are 350 million people with one language, one God, one culture, all this land, all this water, all this oil, all this gas, all this money. The richest countries on the earth are Arab countries. If they used this power, or even threatened to use this power, what you describe as the strong strategic alliance between the United States and 7 million people would come very quickly to change. I was all my life a comrade of the late Yasser Arafat, God rest his soul. I was there when the Chinese leaders told him, the Arabs are not serious about recovering Palestine. If they were serious, they could all walk into Palestine and take it back. That's what the Chinese would do, or at least would have done in those days. But the Arabs will not do that. They will not do anything. We're not asking Al Saud and the others to give their blood. We're not asking them to give their lives. All we're asking them to do is use some of this gigantic wealth which God gave all the Arabs. Just use it. You have, Al Saud has $3 trillion, in the American banks, $3 trillion in the American stock exchange. If they just said, we are withdrawing this unless you free Palestine, then the whole story would be different. I'll be back right after the break. Welcome back to Kalima Horra on Al Mayadeen TV with me, George Galloway, insider, just 1 hour's drive from Jerusalem. And it's Jerusalem we're discussing this evening in the wake of the would-be President of the United States, Mitt Romney's disastrous tour of the world in support of his election campaign. We're here at the LIU Insider, as I say, just an hour away from occupied Jerusalem. But it's the audience's turn to talk largely. And you're up next, sir. Go ahead, please.
طبعا في الوقت الذي كان فيه العرب يضعون كل بيضهم في سلة التسوية، كانت الحكومات الإسرائيلية وقادتها يعملون على أرض الواقع على فرض وقائع جديدة من أجل عدم قيام تسوية حقيقية يريد لها القادة الفلسطينيون والعرب أن تكون، وبالتالي حاولوا منع قيام هذه الدولة أولا، وفرضوا واقعا جديدا استيطانيا تهويديا من خلال التهويد الديني والتهويد الثقافي والتهويد الديموغرافي لمدينة القدس. ولكن الأخطر من هذا كله كان القوانين التي استصدرتها الحكومات الإسرائيلية المتعاقبة، وكان هناك الأخطر فيها قانون أملاك الغائبين الذي يمنع عودة من طردهم الاحتلال من جهة ويصادر أملاكهم من جهة أخرى. أما القانون الثاني الأخطر فهو قانون التعليم، والذي هدفه حرمان أو طرد 30,000 فلسطيني من القدس إلى خارج مدينتهم التي يقيمون فيها. في كل وهذا يعني بكل الأحوال أن الإسرائيلي يسعى ضمن خطة واضحة كان اقترحها رئيس الوزراء الأسبق إيهود أولمرت سابقا، وهدفها جعل اليهود المقيمين في القدس 88%، فيما تخفيض نسبة الفلسطينيين المقيمين في القدس إلى 12%. هذا يعني وبكل وضوح أن الإسرائيلي يريد أن تكون القدس عامل جذب لليهود من كل النواحي، وأن تكون عامل طرد للفلسطينيين أيضا في كل الجوانب التي يسعون إلى تحقيقها. اليوم الإسرائيليون الموجودون في القدس الشريف يبلغ تعدادهم حوالي 185 ألف إسرائيلي، في مقابل ويعيشون في 26 مستوطنة في مقابل 220 ألف فلسطيني. ولكن هذه النسبة أيضا في وضع متغير على أرض الواقع. لذلك اليوم ما نقوله أن ويجب أن يتحمل فيه العرب والفلسطينيون المسؤولية الكاملة، أن القدس إذا ما استمرت عملية التهويد في هذا الإطار سارية تسير على قدم وساق، فإننا سنقول على القدس السلام، وستصبح إسرائيلية يهودية بامتياز. لذلك اليوم القدس تعيش أخطر مراحلها، وعلى العرب وعلى المسلمين وعلى الفلسطينيين بشكل خاص أن يتحركوا جميعا من أجل فرض واقع جديد. لا يكفي ما يقدمه الفلسطينيون هناك من تضحيات ويتحملوا من اعتداءات للمستوطنين، إنما يجب على العرب وعلى المسلمين أن يتحركوا بشكل فاعل، وأن تقوم الجامعة العربية بإرسال الأموال التي أقرتها في القمة العربية الأخيرة إلى القدس من أجل دعمها. وهذا ليس منة منهم علينا، ولكن هو واجب على الجميع من أجل أن لا نخسر القدس. وشكرا لك دكتور جالوي.
Well, thank you for those very valuable facts and statistics which help to guide us on this question this evening. And I agree with every word that you said. The Arab League has done nothing about Jerusalem, but it's endlessly in session now about Arab conflicts. The United Nations, how long did we struggle to even to try to reach the United Nations General Assembly on the question of recognition, even of a mini Palestinian state, tiny 22% Palestinian state. We couldn't get it on the United Nations. Syria is on the United Nations every day. Resolutions introduced by Arab countries. Saudi Arabia just forced yet another resolution on Syria into the United Nations. Why don't they force such a resolution about Jerusalem? If they have this power, why don't they try to use it on the question of Jerusalem? So you are absolutely correct. It is wajib, duty on everyone, every free citizen in the world. I believe on every true Christian in the world, and definitely on every Muslim in the world, to try to recover Jerusalem. But it's not being done, and there's not much time left. I disagree with you only in one respect. Of course, if it continues at this pace, there will be no more Palestinians in Jerusalem. That's true. But we will never forget Jerusalem. Even if there is no more single Palestinian left in Jerusalem, there will be hundreds of thousands with the right to return to Jerusalem. And their children, I believe, will not forget this. But thank you for an excellent contribution. Let's take someone else from the audience. Yes, sir.
مازن العناني. سيد جالوي، من سنة 1917 صدر سايكس بيكو، ومن ثم وعد بلفور، ومن ثم قامت بريطانيا وفرنسا بتقاسم العالم. نحن نتحدث عن سرطان في القدس، ولكن هذا السرطان صناعة فرنسية بريطانية أصلية لغاية عام 1967 حين ورثت أمريكا العالم من بريطانيا وفرنسا. وهناك مجموعة من القرارات الدولية التي تلزم إسرائيل أولا بإقامة دولة عربية ودولة يهودية، ومن ثم 242 الذي يقول دولة على حدود 67. أمريكا بكل حضارتها ما هي إلا نتاج فعل بريطاني فرنسي أيضا، هو الذي أوجد هذا السرطان المتفشي الآن في القدس. نحن كنا نتحدث عن فلسطين، ومن ثم أصبحنا نتحدث عن الضفة وغزة، واليوم نتحدث عن القدس، وبكرة احنا نتحدث عن سلوان، وبعد بكرة ممكن نتحدث عن غرفة حد الأقصى، أو نجد المسجد الأقصى وقع على الأرض. المشكلة مش بالعرب، العرب لأنه هدول صناعة بريطانية بالأساس. كل المؤسسة الأنظمة العربية بتقدميها ويساريها ومتخلفيها ورجعيها هم صناعة بريطانية. أنت سألت وين القادة اللي ممكن يحرروا القدس؟ هم موجودين وقاتلوا وانتصروا على إسرائيل بال2007 وجعلوها تنسحب كالكلاب بال2002. لكن ماذا فعل العالم لهذول القادة؟ حولهم إلى إرهابيين، أصبح يطاردهم وأصبح يضيق عليهم، وكل من يرفع صوته في وجه إسرائيل يصبح إما مطلوب أو إرهابي. فلا يوجد نقص بالرجال، ولا يوجد نقص في العزيمة، ولا في ناس عندها أقل واجب من أي إنسان بدافع وبحب وطنه. لكن الغرب وكل أدواته في الوطن العربي هي اللي بتمنعنا نقوم بالواجب.
Well, I work and have sat for 25 years in the very building where this crime against the Palestinian people was written by Balfour, who promised one people the land of another people on behalf of our people, without consulting any of the three people involved. The British were never asked, do you want to be the author of this tragedy? The Jews were never asked, do you want to go and live in Palestine? Because at that time, 99% of them would have said, no, we are Europeans, they would have said. And of course, the Palestinian people, whose land it was, were the last to be asked, and were never asked. And I walk past the room every day in Parliament in Britain, where Balfour made this crime. But I also walk past the room every day where Sykes and Picot, around about exactly the same time, committed the other crime against the Arabs. And their plan, just like Balfour's plan, still lives almost 100 years later. And I must tell you, neither Balfour, nor Sykes, nor Picot could ever have imagined that the Arabs would accept all of this for 100 years. Instead, we have a situation where Sykes-Picot too, the Arabs seem ready to accept the same thing for another 100 years. So, of course, the foreigner, the Hawaja, is the author of this tragedy. But who did they place in charge of these Arab regimes? Giants? Are these kings and presidents giants? Are they Supermen? Are they James Bond? How come decade after decade? Hosni Mubarak was a stupid lavashkiri, but he lasted more than 30 years as the president of the great Egypt. Don't blame that on the British. You have to blame that on the Egyptians. I could go through all these rulers one by one, but Mayadin will be angry with me if I do. Don't blame the British. What do you expect from the British? They came here to steal what's yours. You know what George Bush tried to say in Fahrenheit 9/11. He made a mistake in saying it. I'll say it properly. He said, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But isn't this the case? Aren't the Arabs still being fooled? They are slaughtering each other, not far from here. Muslims are slaughtering Muslims because they have a slight difference in sect or confession whilst Palestine is being stolen, whilst Jerusalem is being destroyed. They are killing each other in Aleppo to please, to entertain, and to profit the same foreigners who destroyed Palestine with this declaration in the first place. Next one last question before I break. Yes, madam.
زينة عناني راديو تي في ستودنت at the Lebanese International University. يعني بعد الثورات العربية لم يعد أحد يتكلم عن القضية الفلسطينية. فهل برأيك أن هذه الثورات العربية من باطنها أو أحد أهدافها من الأمريكان وحلفائهم هي غض النظر عن هذه القضية؟
No, I really don't. The Arab revolutions are real revolutions and they are decades late. And I wish for revolutionary change in the Arab world from Marrakesh to Bahrain, to popular governments elected by the people, removable by the people, because only democratic governments can be forced by their people to do what is right, both in their own lands and on Arab questions in general. The West did not want to see revolution in the Arab world. The West supported Ben Ali until he was on the aeroplane. The West supported Mubarak until the last hour of his presidency. The Western countries did not want to see revolution in the Arab world. But once there was a revolution in the Arab world, of course, they tried to throw sand in the eyes of the Arabs so that they could not see the way clearly forward. So no, don't fall for this fatalistic attitude that somehow these Arab revolutions are a product of Western conspiracy. This is not true. The Arabs had a right to make revolution. They had an obligation, actually, to make revolution. And they are decades late in making this revolution. But you are right in this, sister. You are right in this. There will be no Arab freedom as long as Jerusalem is in prison. There will be no Arab freedom as long as Palestine doesn't exist on the map and its people are scattered around the world. So a measure of whether or not an Arab revolution in any particular country has been a success will be what is that new Arab country doing about Palestine. Because there is no point in having a big revolution, even shedding your blood and others' blood, and turning everything upside down if you don't do anything to recover Jerusalem, because then it hasn't been a revolution at all. We are here in the LIU in Saida, 1 hour drive, at least at the speed I drive, to Jerusalem, and we're talking about Al-Quds Al-Sharif. The young lady said nobody's talking about Palestine. Al-Mayadeen is talking about Palestine. Kalima Horra is talking about Palestine. And I swear before God, the last word on my lips on this earth will be Palestine. I'll be back right after the break. Welcome back to Kalima Horra on Al-Mayadeen TV. I'm at the Lebanese International University in the ancient city of Saida, just 1 hour's driving time away from occupied Jerusalem. And that's what we're talking about this evening. The audience has the floor now. You, sir, are next in line. Please go ahead.
مالك أبي نادر. أنا أعتقد أنه زيارة رومني إلى القدس مثل كل الزيارات اللي بيجوا فيها المرشحين يقدموا أوراق اعتماد لللوبي اليهودي اللوبي الصهيوني بأمريكا. أن تهويد القدس يتم على طريقة بسيطة وخطة إسرائيلية لون تيرم، يعني على المدى الطويل. تعتمد أول شيء على إضاعة الهوية الفلسطينية بقلب القدس، ترهيب الفلسطينيين الموجودين بالقدس. نقطة ثانية، نقطة ثالثة حكى عنها زميلي هو تطبيق قانون الغائبين. في شغلة كتير مهمة عم تصير حاليا هن على الحفريات بمحيط الأقصى. أولا للتشكيك ووضع في المفتي عكرمة بيقول انه عم يحطوا قبور تيدعوا انه القدس مبنية على هيكل يهودي. هكذا يتم تهويد القدس، ولكن الامريكان لا يستطيعون ولا اي احد يستطيع ان يهور القدس اذا كان الفلسطينيين لن يخرجوا من القدس وسيقاوموا. الاسرائيليين يتبعون استراتيجية طويلة الامد بالشقاق بين الفلسطينيين. أعطوا السلطة الفلسطينية بالاتفاق وأجلوا بحث موضوع القدس للاتفاق النهائي الذي سيكون مع الموضوع المهجرين الفلسطينيين. وهذه شغلتين ما بينحلوا أبدا، لا موضوع القدس بينحل ولا موضوع المهجرين الفلسطينيين بينحلوا يعني أبدا بالعرف الإسرائيلي. مشان هيك أنا بعتقد أنه يجب التركيز فقط على ما تقوم به بلدية القدس والحكومات الإسرائيلية بتأني أي تيئيس الفلسطينيين الموجودين في الداخل وشراء أراضيهم بأموال طائلة إغراء بالمال وأكيد التشكيك برمزية الأقصى وجعله أنه هو يقوم على هيكل إسرائيلي لكي يقال أنه الأقصى هو رمز المسلمين، هو مغتصب لهيكل يهودي. وشكرا.
Actually, their archaeology is going very badly. In fact, all it's proving so far is the truth of the thesis of Shlomo Sands, Professor Shlomo Sands, whose wonderful book I recommend to you, The Myth of the Jewish People. This is an Israeli Jewish professor who has established in a wonderful piece of work that actually the Jewish people as we know it today has nothing to do with Palestine at all. It is the mass of what we know as the Jewish people today were European people in Central and Eastern Europe who converted to Judaism. Of course, somebody who is now born in the territory, someone who is born in what they call Israel, we call Palestine, he has rights. This was theorized long time ago by Naif Hawatmeh, and I agreed with it at the time, and it's obvious now that these people have, I'm not saying because 700 or 800 or 1,000 years ago they came from Eastern or Central Europe that they don't have a right to live there now. They do have a right to live there now, but not in somebody else's house, not on somebody else's land, and not while the person whose house and land it is in a refugee camp in Ain al-Helwa or Rashidia here in the southern part of Lebanon and is forbidden to return. But their archaeology, all this digging, what did it show? Nothing, zero. They didn't establish yet one single thing which proves the central religious thesis that they have developed over the years. But of course, this religious thesis is new. None of the Zionist leaders who took the promise from Balfour, none of the Zionist leaders believed even in God. They were all atheists, every one. Herzl and all of these people were unbelievers. They didn't believe in God. It's only later that they developed, because it was useful to them, this biblical case for Zionism, as if God was an estate agent or a real estate man who gave them this land at somebody else's expense. So thank you for bringing that historical, archaeological point up. Yes, the gentleman behind you. Yes, sir.
يعطيك العافية. لقد تعرفت عليك منذ ما يزيد عن 8 إلى 10 سنوات، وقد زرتنا في مخيم عين الحلوة وعرفناك مناصرا لقضية الشعب الفلسطيني، وقد قلت في قاعة الشهيد اللواء زياد الأطرش أننا شعب الجبارين، وأذكر ذلك تماما، ونحن نثني على ذلك الخطاب لك في مخيم عين الحلوة، ونقول أن الشعب الفلسطيني ومنذ النكبة وحتى اليوم ما زال شلال الدم الفلسطيني النازف ينزف دما، ولقد قدمنا الشهداء ومئات آلاف الشهداء ونفخر بذلك. سؤالي لك، أين هو أو أين هي الديمقراطية وحقوق الإنسان التي يتغنى بها الغرب وتتغنى بها أمريكا مما يحصل ويجري في فلسطين؟ لقد قلت لك أن الشعب الفلسطيني قدم العديد من التضحيات، وهذا معروف للجميع. أكثر من 65 عاما والنضال الفلسطيني ما زال مستمرا. أين هي حقوق الإنسان التي يتغنى بها الغرب؟ أين هي الديمقراطية مما يحصل من فلسطين وفي فلسطين؟ هناك ما يزيد عن 8000 أسير فلسطيني يجوعون بشكل يومي، وقد خاضوا حربا بأمعائهم الخاوية من أجل رفعة كلمة الحق على المحتل الإسرائيلي. نحن نقول بوضوح أن لا أمن ولا سلام ولا استقرار في هذا العالم حتى يتحقق للاجئ الفلسطيني حقه بالعودة إلى وطنه فلسطين، وفي إقامة الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس الشريف كاملة السيادة وخالية من الاستيطان. تلك هي الثوابت التي استشهد القادة الفلسطينيين من أجلها، وسنبقى نطالب بهذا حتى آخر قطرة دماء في جسدنا. شكرا لك.
Well, as long as the Palestinians have young men like you, there will never be a time when Jerusalem is forgotten, whatever others think. I'm absolutely sure about that. And welcome to the people from Ain al-Hilwi. My first visit was in 1980. So 1980 is 32 years ago. And they almost killed me by tabbouleh. I never ate tabbouleh ever again. But it's good to see you from the camp. And I salute the people of all the Palestinian camps as we discuss this evening. I, of course, agree entirely with what you say. But you have to grasp this truth. It's a melancholy truth, and I'm sorry to say it. And of course, there are many exceptions in Western countries. But for most people in the West, the blood of some people is more valuable than the blood of others. So, roughly speaking, the ratio is 1,000 to 1. 1,000 Palestinians is equal to 1 Israeli, or at least 1 American, 1 British. That's the rough order of translation. And the suffering of the Palestinian people doesn't even make it onto the news most days. Only when some really extreme event occurs. While Syria is the #1 item on the news in every Western news channel and has been month after month after month. They are weeping for the Syrian people. So am I. But why were they not weeping for the Palestinian people before that? Year after year, decade after decade. Because they are hypocrites, that's why. They are not really weeping for the Syrian people. They are weeping for effect, to try to bring about the conditions for foreign intervention in the war in Syria, whilst they are supporting Israel in the war against the Palestinian people. So how can they be open about the suffering of the Palestinian people? That's their excuse. What's ours here in the Arab world? You know, once, the late Sheikh Zayed, who was a very great man, who was actually the best of all of these kings, he was the best. But even he, one of his sons asked me once in London, in Mayfair in London, why is the Israeli lobby so much more successful than our lobby? I told him, Your Highness, we don't have a lobby. But here in Mayfair, within 50 yards of where we are sitting, there are Arabs in every casino spending more money on the tables, playing cards and roulette to make 10 lobbies. We could make 10 lobbies just from the money they are gambling this evening. The Israelis, you have to take your hat off to them. Even though the politicians hate each other in Israel. They are completely divided people. But on one thing they are united. And they are ready to put their money and their effort into that one thing, which is the defense of Zionism and the defense of their state. Until we can match this, then we're not even in the competition for the hearts and minds of the Western people. And I repeat, the late Sheikh Zayed was a friend of mine. I mean no disrespect to him. If all the rulers were like him, we'd be in a better situation today. Yes, who's next with the microphone? Yes, sir, at the back.
مساء الخير. علي وهبي عن الحزب الديمقراطي الشعبي. حضرتك تفضلت قلت انه بموضوع زياره رومني للقدس، وقلت كنت عم تقول انه اذا اعيد انتخاب اوباما ممكن يقدم افضل قضيه فلسطينيه، لكن هل فعلا الرئيس المنتخب هو اللي بحدد السياسه الخارجيه او حتى السياسه الداخليه الامريكانيه، ام هي سياسه دوله ثابته ما بتتغير بغض النظر اللي كان عم بحددها، يعني بغض النظر شو كان الرئيس ديمقراطي او جمهوري؟ اثنين، بعلاقه امريكا باسرائيل، تحالف استراتيجي بين الدولتين، هل فعلا اللوبي الصهيوني هو المؤثر، هو الطرف الاقوى على السياسه الامريكيه، ام انه اسرائيل هي قاعده متقدمه للامريكان او قاعده متقدمه للامبرياليه الامريكيه بالمنطقه، وهي اداه بايدهم مثل كل باقي الحكام العرب بايدهم؟ يعني هل فعلا اسرائيل هي اللي عم تضغط على الامريكان، او انه الاسرائيليين والعرب هن شركاء بلعبه امريكيه واحده؟ شكرا.
A very, very good question from the Popular Socialist Party. A very good question indeed. And I have an answer which I think you will agree with, but many do not. Israel works for America, not America works for Israel. The tail never wags the dog. The dog always wags the tail. It's a big mistake to imagine that it's the tail wagging the dog, because then you are looking to cut the tail. The problem is not the tail, but the head. The problem is the master, and the master is American imperialism and its allies in the world. One of the prime examples of which is what they call Israel. As long as it's in America's interest for Israel to do what it does, it will continue to do it. This, I believe, is undoubtedly true. Let me try and squeeze one more question in before the break. Yes, sir, the gentleman in front.
صبري المطور. سؤال صغير. شو الخطوات اللي لازم نتبعها لنوقف الاستيطان بالقدس؟ شكرا.
Well, 15,000 illegal settlement dwellings were built in the West Bank, including in the environs of Jerusalem, in just the last year, only the last year, during a period which the Americans asked Israel to stop building them, and Israel said that they would stop building them. But in fact, they built 15,000. And I've been going. I can't go now. It would be impossible for me to go now for a variety of reasons. But I was first in the occupied West Bank in 1980, same year of the Tabulle massacre in Ain al-Hilwe. In 1980, the West Bank looked completely different to what it looked today, and Jerusalem looked even more different. So just in that 32 years, there has been a dramatic transformation. Silently, year by year, new facts. The apartheid wall, the Judaization, the demolitions, the refusal of planning permissions for people to build extra rooms, extra houses, extra parts to their houses, the new settlements in the greater Jerusalem area. Settlements, you know, conjures up an idea in most people's minds of log cabins in the frontier of the United States. In fact, these settlements are like cities. They are like Beverly Hills, with their fountains using the Palestinian water, their swimming pools. These are major investments in real estate. So our stand has to dramatically change. We have to prioritize Jerusalem. I myself have been talking about nothing except Gaza for the last few years because we had to. But now that Egypt is free, we ought to be able to switch our emphasis to Jerusalem and to the right of the Palestinian people to return. There'll be more discussion from the floor here in Sidon, but after this break. Welcome back to Kalima Horra with me, George Galloway, on Al Mayadeen TV. We're in Sidon, just 100 kilometers from occupied Jerusalem, and we're talking about Jerusalem this evening. I want to get as many of the audience in as I can, so Madam, you're first, please.
نيابة عن إدارة الجامعة اللبنانية الدولية، اسمح لي مستر جالاوي أن أرحب بك والضيوف الكرام الأساتذة والطلاب الأعزاء. من خلال تصفحي لبعض مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي، طبعا ملاحظتي أنا وملاحظة معظم الناس عن مدى شعبيتك الكبيرة من خلال دعمك للقضية المركزية الفلسطينية ومن خلال موقفك النبيل مما جرى في غزة على العدوان على غزة. ولكن هذه الشعبية لا ألاحظها من خلال مواقفك مما يحصل في سوريا. أولاً، ما تعليقك وما مدى تأثير الإعلام المفبرك والمنظم على قضايانا؟ وشكراً.
Well, thank you very much for your kind welcome and your kind words. I never accept thanks for my work on Palestine. I always reply, La shukra la wajib. It's my duty. I promised the people in the camps here in Lebanon in 1977 that for the rest of my life, as long as God gave me breath, I would raise their case and fight for their cause. And I have done so by the grace of God, and I will do so as long as I have breath. My stand on Syria is clear. The era of one-party rule, dictatorship in all Arab countries has to come to an end. It's better if it comes to an end by dialogue, by negotiation, rather than by Arabs killing each other for the benefit of others, those others who destroyed Palestine and support the occupation of Jerusalem. That's all. Actually, I've made a podcast on this very subject. You can find it on my own YouTube channel at any time, George Galloway on Syria. Some people say I haven't been speaking about Syria. In fact, I'm speaking about it all the time. They don't really mean that I'm not speaking about Syria. They mean that I'm not saying what they want to hear about Syria. But I only ever say what I believe in my heart. I might be wrong, but you can be sure that I'm not saying it for any other reason than that I believe it. Nobody can buy me, nobody can sell me, nobody can tell me what to say and what not to say. By the grace of God, I'm a free and independent man. That's why this program is called Kalima Horra. So the media war that we are involved in is a very critical battle. It is increasingly important. Over this last decade, we have seen the proliferation of new media channels, the decline of the era of monopoly control by a few Western monopolies of the means of communication. Now we have Facebook. I have almost 100,000 followers on Facebook. We have Twitter. I have almost 100,000 followers on Twitter. I have 12,000 videos on YouTube, most of which, 99% of which, I didn't put up myself. I can find ways to speak, and people can find ways to hear what I have to say. But of course, it's a ceaseless struggle. People try to buy you. People try to buy the means of communication. But I believe that this technological revolution that we are in the middle of will make it increasingly impossible for monopoly forces, however rich they are, to control what's happening. If you look at Al-Mayadeen, for example, it came into being because there is a vacuum in the Arab TV market for a genuine, free and independent TV channel. Everybody knows that channels which belong to this or that royal family or state are just mouthpieces for that royal family or that state. Everybody knows it. Even those few which once had credibility, but which have committed journalistic suicide by deciding to tear up their journalistic contract with their viewers in favor of being a Pravda. You know, I quite liked the political line of Pravda, but even I would never have read Pravda because I don't want to read propaganda. I don't want to watch propaganda. I want to watch the truth, because how can I know what's really happening if I'm not seeking out the truth? So Al-Mayadeen is making huge progress precisely because people can believe. Ghassan bin Jiddo is the personification of what a journalist should be. And some people will not like this that he said, others will not like that, but they all know that Ghassan bin Jiddo says what he means, and he means what he says. And I hope that the same is true of myself. Who's next with the microphone? Yes, sir.
أحمد عمر حسين قطاع طلاب التنظيم الشعبي
أهلاً
المصري. في ظل الحديث عن تهويد القدس وفلسطين لا يمكننا أن ننكر دور مصر أم الدنيا من القضية العربية. أريد أن أعرف ما هو رأي جورج جالوي من الرئيس مرسي ومن جماعة الإخوان المسلمين.
Well, first of all, the Egyptian people sacrificed more than any other Arab people in the struggle to free Palestine. It's not their fault that Palestine is not free. The great President Nasser, of whom you are a follower, was the greatest of all the Arab leaders historically. The Lebanese national resistance, not far from here, in its strength, and its leader, Said Hassan Nasrallah, is the last man standing in this line. And I salute him and his movement in this regard. Egypt is the heart of the Arab world. Egypt is the center of the Arab world. The Egyptian people are the greatest in number and the greatest in culture and history and in diplomatic weight in the world. And the fact that their revolution has overthrown the dictatorship, even though that revolution is not finished, because revolution is not an event, it's a process. The French Revolution took 10 years. The Bolshevik Revolution took 7 years. The Egyptian Revolution is only just 1 year old. This process will continue, and there will be 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But the Egyptian people will never be under the heel of dictatorship again. I wanted to see the victory of President Morsi. I salute his victory, but it will be measured not just by what he does for the Egyptian masses, but by what he does for Palestine. It will be measured, his presidency will be measured when I go, God willing, next month with yet another Viva Palestina Arabia convoy into Gaza. If I go freely, we'll know there has really been a victory. If I have the same problem I had before, we'll know that there is some distance still to travel. Thank you for the opportunity to say that. Yes, the gentleman next to you. Yes, sir.
بلال حجازي LIU ستودنت تنظيم الشعب الناصري. بس بما انه نحن هلا في الربيع العربي والثورات العربيه، الجميع بيعتبر انه الثورات العربيه هي الطريق الجديد لتحرير فلسطين والاقصى، وهذا كلنا ان شاء الله بندعي له. بس هل الشيء المضبوط ام ان اقنعه جديده لناس جديد لمتابعه السياسه السابقه؟
Well, there has only been 2 successful revolutions so far, and both of them are not finished, and one of them is less finished than the other. I spent more than 20 years in London during his exile with Sheikh Rashid Ghannouchi. He is my friend, and I respect him very much. He is now the leader in Tunisia. His party, Ennahda, won a landslide victory in the election. They have many opponents internally, and they have many pressures on them externally. But even he is my friend, I will judge him by what he's doing for Palestine, just as I will judge President Morsi in Egypt. So it's too early to say is the real answer to your question. It's true, as the young lady said, that the short-term casualty of the Arab Revolution has been Palestine. Nobody is talking about Palestine except us. And the Arabs are fighting each other now for the entertainment of the others and paid for by the agents of the others. But this is a short-term issue. In the medium term and in the long term, it can only help the Palestinian cause to transform the Arab landscape. They say that in the desert, it only takes a few drops of rain to transform the landscape. And that landscape will look completely different 5 years from now. And if we have democracy in the Arab countries, the governments will have to act in support of the Palestinian people, because that's what their people all want them to do. Because for all I have said about the Arab rulers, I have never been in any doubt from Marrakesh to Bahrain that the Arab masses believe, first of all, that they are one Arab people, and two, that Palestine is sacred for them. And so their governments will have to act in accordance with that if these revolutions are successful. That's why I wish them every success in the months and years to come. Now, who has the microphone? Yes, Madame.
وعد الخطيب جمعية ناشط الثقافية. Mr. George, welcome to Saida, and hopefully next time we would meet in Jerusalem.
Inshallah.
I have noticed that you have concentrated on the issue of Jerusalem, which is very important, and we all acknowledge it as a very great issue. But what about the main issue of the illegal occupation of Palestine? Even if what you said happened and Qatar did buy Jerusalem, the main issue would not be solved, and Palestine will still be occupied by Israel. Thank you.
Palestine will not be free until every Palestinian in the world, whether they are living in Rashidiyah or Ain al-Hilwi or in California or in London, can return to their home and their land. We need one state, democratic state, from the river to the sea. Israel-Palestine, Palestine-Israel, call it what you like. But the only solution is for the right of return of all the Palestinian people to be recognized and acknowledged and implemented. But we have an emergency here. Just like the lady from the university was very kind to mention my efforts to break the siege on Gaza. I did this not because I believe Gaza is Palestine. Gaza is a small part of Palestine. I did it not because I don't care about the Palestinians in Jenin. I care everything about the Palestinians in Jenin and the people here in the camps in Lebanon. But it was an emergency. If we could not defend Gaza from siege and starvation, how could we liberate Palestine? If we cannot save Jerusalem from ethnic cleansing, how can we liberate Palestine? So I don't think these things are contradictions. I believe there is no dichotomy here, that we have to fight on each of these fronts. But now that Gaza, I hope, with President Morsi in power, is moving towards a new situation, let's call it that. It's time to focus on Jerusalem, because if we can rally people all over the world behind Jerusalem, then we'll be able to free Palestine, I'm sure. One more question. One more. Yes, Madam.
دلال صديق جمعية ناشط الثقافية. First, I want to welcome you, Mr. George, here in Saida. Mr. George, you talked about the attitude of the Arab leaders and their responsibility towards the Jerusalem issue. And we all know that they did nothing for our issue. But what about the responsibility of the Europe and the West from this? Thank you.
Well, of course, Europe as the author and the funder and the armorer of Israel, the Europe and the United States, bear a heavy responsibility in this. But they will continue to do exactly what they are doing as long as they can get away with it. If someone can behave in an immoral way and they face no punishment, in fact, they face reward, why would they change? And that's the way you have to look at it. So I always say, I am a European. I am struggling daily in the parliament itself, in the land of Balfour, in the building of Balfour and Sykes and Picot. I'm doing everything I can, and I have millions of friends. 6 times I have been elected to the British Parliament, speaking as I'm speaking to you this evening. But don't wait for Godot. Don't think the Europeans and the Americans are going to liberate Palestine. It's the Muslims who have the primary responsibility to liberate Palestine. It's the Arabs who have the primary responsibility. And if they act as they should act, the West and the Europeans will come after them, because you have many things that the West needs. They need your money, they need your oil, they need your gas, they need your strategic importance. But if you give them all of this for nothing, why should they pay you? It's simple, I believe. Well, I hope that we have this evening in Kalima Horra on Al Mayadeen TV at least raise the flag of Jerusalem, raise the banner of Jerusalem. We will never tire of doing so, even if others are preoccupied with other things. I said at the beginning that we believe that every word has the right to be free. All the words I've spoken this evening were free words, but they were not the words of Al Mayadeen TV. They were not the words of our hosts. They were not the words of anybody except me. So if they were wrong, blame me and not them. Wassalamu alaikum. Thank you very much indeed for coming to the program this evening.